And Kieran, as we know today at this Liberal launch, it's in the newspapers, a new policy from Scott Morrison, if he's elected, that people will be able to use $300,000 from the age of 55 and put it in their superannuation.
Andrew Clennell, thanks. You'll be speaking to Murray Watt of the Labor Party shortly. First, so let's bring in live here at the Liberal launch, Michael Sukkar, the Assistant Treasurer and Housing Minister. Thanks very much for your time. Can you give us a bit more detail on that policy for, basically it's for downsizers over the age of 55?
So one of the great ways to increase housing stock is to facilitate or to remove some of the barriers to people who want to downsize from the typical large family home. One of the big barriers has been to downsizing is what you do with the excess proceeds. And prior to 2017, essentially you were unable to put that into superannuation because of concessional contribution caps. That's been a very successful policy since 2017, allowing people to put up to $300,000 from the proceeds of a downsize into their super, so $600,000 for a couple. At present, it relates to people who are 60 or older. We're now bringing that down to 55. It's removing the barriers then to downsizing, and essentially for couples being able to put up to $600,000 into a concessionally taxed environment like super, we know will encourage them to do so. Since the policy's been in place, we've had more than 36,000 people access the scheme, $9.4 billion. So we know it works. We know it's freeing up more housing stock, those larger family homes, for other people to be able to purchase. And now bringing the age down to 55, we know will mean more than 1 million extra Australians will be eligible.
Pensioners can lose their pension, though, after 2 years, given the assets test.
Yeah.
That's right, isn't it?
So at present it's 12 months, but it will be 2 years under the changes we're proposing. And in addition, we will change the deeming rates from the asset deeming rate to the income deeming rate, which essentially will mean that the amount of imputed income on that amount that you've downsized from in that intervening period, from the time you sold your family home to bought a new home, will be lower, which essentially means more people will be able to keep their pension, will be not required to reassess their pension as well while they're in that period between selling the family home and buying a new one.
Is it a good thing, though, if more people are off the pension, if they have enough from equity in their own home? Would that be an ideal outcome?
Well, in essence, what we're trying to do is make sure that from the time that you've sold your family home to bought your new one, you're no worse off. And I think this is an important change. So in addition to allowing couples to put up to $600,000 into their super, it also means they've got that flexibility in that period from selling the home to buying a new one without it really impacting their pension, because,
but does
as
it mean
you all
that
know,
more people can provide for their own retirement, basically,
well,
as opposed to relying on the government?
And that'll be assessed once they've purchased their own home. But in that intervening period where you've sold and you're looking for your new home, we're providing that continuity. We think that's important.
Yeah, absolutely, for 2 years. But there is, the reality is that some will lose their pension after 2 years because of the...
Well, we're not changing...
We've seen what the property prices are. Their assets test will go through the roof.
We're not changing any of that. All we're doing is ensuring that the funds that have been released as part of that downsize are, the imputed income on that is now lower. So it's going to help a lot.
So why is this the key policy today? Why is this central to the Liberal pitch?
Look, wait for the speech. The reality is we think it's very important to increase housing stock as, one of the key aspects of housing. We know that so many of the problems in housing can be assisted through increasing the stock. One of the things we can do as a Commonwealth, we can't release land like states, we can't reform planning like states who have primary responsibility. What we can do is encourage a really significant cohort of Australians who are in big family homes, who many want to downsize, and we know since 2017 they've been very enthusiastic about this policy, to remove the barriers that they currently face in doing so. It frees up that stock for ultimately families and others, and as I said, it's been very popular. $9.4 billion has been contributed as part of this already, and bringing it down to 55 will just mean these benefits flow to tens of thousands of more Australians.
You've been around politics long enough. You know the strategies behind the timing of different things, and I guess the question I want to ask you is, why is this launch so late? There've already been 1.6 million pre-polls cast.
Well, I mean, it's not new that we'd have, campaign launches relatively late in the campaign. This has been a 6-week campaign too, so a slightly longer campaign. I think the important message from today, Kieran, will be that Australia is leading the economic recovery of the world, but there are speed bumps ahead, and there's a great deal of uncertainty in the world. Our recovery is not assured. It's certainly not assured under someone like Anthony Albanese, who we've seen does not understand the economy and does not have costed policies. Every major policy he's announced has essentially fallen apart within 24 or 48 hours. And so, the important message from today will be it's been a difficult 2 years. We've led the world. We've done some extraordinary things in very hard times, but now we look forward with a sense of hope and optimism and empowering those aspirational Australians, who ultimately we want to always facilitate in their lives.
But given the trend to vote early, the pre-poll postals, as I said, it's 1.6 million pre-polls already, upwards of 1 million postals, I think, sent in. It just seems odd that this is being held a week after the early voting began.
I don't think it's odd. I mean, we could have had an identical conversation at the last election, particularly with the discussion around polls and other things. And I actually probably do, recall reasonably similar conversations that we had at the time.
Do you think it's a similar challenge now to what it was in 2019, or is it harder?
No. I think every election's unique, but in this election, I think the choice is very stark. Yes, at the last election, Labor, who showed an element of honesty of at least saying that what they were going to do, provided a stark choice. Here we've got Anthony Albanese, who's really trying to slide into office without saying anything, without really putting forward an agenda, but just seeing his inability to grasp the economy, I think also has provided, probably by accident on the Labor side, has provided that stark contrast. And so, Australian elections are about a lot of things, but for many Australians, it boils down to the security of their job, the health of the economy, their ability to provide for their children and their family and the prosperity of their family. And I think many Australians would rightly have serious doubts about the Labor Party and particularly the opposition leader.
Is Scott Morrison a drag on your vote?
No, he's not. I mean, the Prime Minister has done a remarkable job during a really difficult time. And, just like...
well, why is he trying to change the message about who he is?
Well, I don't agree that he is. I was with the Prime Minister yesterday, and really the message, I think, is we've been through an extraordinarily difficult time. We know that the pandemic required us to operate in a certain way, and now we're looking forward to the recovery with a sense of optimism. And I think now, at this stage, it's really well suited to the coalition because we want to put Australians in the driver's seat.
But he said he'll change after the election. What's that about?
No, I think the point is the way, the way you govern during a pandemic will be different to the way you govern in a recovery. I think everyone really accepts that, and the way in which you have to make really quick decisions. JobKeeper being an example, the largest single Commonwealth government program ever, but put in place, in record time. You wouldn't expect to be putting in place policies like that in a recovery phase. So the way you govern is dictated by the circumstances.
Anthony Albanese obviously has had a few slip-ups. One of them, though, more recently, which has worked in his favour in terms of the minimum wage by many people's reckoning. Can you say that a person on the minimum wage, $20.33 an hour, shouldn't have a pay rise to cover cost of living?
Well, the Fair Work Commission will make
Do you think someone on the minimum wage should have enough to cover the cost of living rises?
The Fair Work Commission will make these calls, and that's the...
What's your personal
view? That's been a bipartisan position. Well, my position is the position that I'm just stating. It's been a bipartisan position. Now, if you're saying to me that Anthony Albanese sort of accidentally made a mistake, but it sort of worked out okay for him, well, that's an interesting interpretation.
Well, no, just that it would resonate with a lot of people.
We've seen a succession of errors.
If you're getting paid $20 an hour, that would resonate.
Sure, but we've seen a succession of his inability to answer very basic questions. We saw Andrew Clennell ask the very obvious and pointed and good question about the unemployment rate, but we've seen a succession of fumbles since that time, and an aged care policy that is drawing on a workforce that doesn't exist, for example, a policy that was supposedly costed by the PBO that we later find out wasn't costed by the PBO. It's been a succession of errors, and Labor Party members and MPs that I speak to are on tenterhooks every day. They're walking on eggshells because I think they know that the Leader of the Opposition's not up to it. He's just not up to it. We see one error after another, and I think that has displayed an inability or a disinterest in the economy, and I think that makes a lot of Australians very nervous.
Now, we saw the PM in Deakin with you yesterday.
It's great.
Is that seat under threat? Do you feel like you're in a real contest there?
Look, we fight every election in Deakin. At Deakin, we work hard for every vote. I was really keen to have the PM visit. I wanted the PM to visit. It was a really wonderful visit to one of my local sporting clubs. So, you know, we enjoy having the PM come along. We fight for every vote at every election, and we've fortunately always been able to get the support of our electors. We don't take anything for granted. We'll keep fighting for every vote until election day.
Is it?
Well, we'll see on Saturday night. Yeah.
We will. We'll stay in touch. Michael Sukkar, thanks for your time. Appreciate it.